Does that make sense? Like the sea of energy that we live in. Let's take one of the predictions. We predicted that this would be in space. We predicted that stone spheres would fall from the sky on planets with magnetic fields that have volcanic activity. So it's a bit like trying to describe every piece of life on the Earth by saying, well, we know what an earthworm does, or we know what one plant does. So this orb bar wave is, well, let's see if I can describe it. The orb bar wave carries the message of creation. Does that make any sense?
It does. Sort of like,
So that so then let's say that the soul returns back to its source, back to the light. It will travel in the sphere into the tunnel with the rings round it, which is the wave and bar, and travels back to the source of the creator. Does that make sense? So yes, it is the soul, but it is also the stuff that makes matter.
yeah, it's
Does that
paradox.
do, sorry?
I just said it's almost a paradox, like a wave and a particle at the same
That's
time.
it. So
Yeah.
so that basically if you then take string theory, there are messenger particles that deliver their message through charge. Now to me that's consciousness. And so these are particles of charge delivering their messages. Now, let's say that some of the orb energy attaches to plants in the spring and gives a signal for germination. Then that quite simply is just one of the Hopi gods, one of their kachinas of the god of planting or the life bringer. If you take the Sumerian tutus, they also have the gods of planting. So we can say, well, orbs, healing. So we say, well, they're the orbs of healing. So you say, well, Paul, how can you make that conclusion? That's so far fetched. And then you take photographs of a colleague who helped us with the research in the very early days. He classes himself as a cosmic shaman. I worked with him just after those near-death experiences, along with a gentleman called Alex Ancilio. His grandfather was a Maori chief. And the trouble is, it does, because of the questions you're trying to answer, well, what is an orb? And it's not that simple. It's a bit like saying, well, describe all life on the planet. And you go, well, where am I going to start? There's one thing for certain chemicals in a pond didn't start life. And that's for certain. I have seen these orbs dividing. In the early days, when we started out on the research, we were working with a biochemist, and we showed her some of our research. And she'd obviously been familiar looking down the microscopes. She said, "You've got viruses dividing on your digital video." And I said to her, "Are you joking?" And she said, "No, no." She said, "That I've seen this down the microscope time and time again." And of course, over time, we find rock art of cell division, the fibroblast process. Now this is Bronze Age, 4,500 years. So everywhere we were looking, we just got our answers back. Yes, this is the life force. This is the energy of creation. If you look at the primordial substance, the Hermetica, they were describing the primordial energy and its transmutations. So I understand the transmutations because the research that we did was as disciplined as I could make it. So I could say to you, well, an orb converts to a bar. That is one of its transmutations. That but that will mean nothing to you, will it?
Right.
So it is a difficult one, and I probably trying to check out too much or trying to make too many links. And it is, after all, this thing has been lost for 4,500 years. It's not going to be. It wasn't easy for me in the past 20 years to come to these conclusions. So I don't know whether I answered anything there, lost my train of thought or whatever.
That's okay. No, I think you did. Yeah, so some of these questions, it is difficult to put it into a simple question.
Yeah.
You did already touch on this. The next question was, what impact do you see the rediscovery of this energy having on science and the healing arts in particular, which is yet again a huge question.
Yeah. Well, I'll try and work with some of the science first, because I think that's there is right and wrong science. Science is based on the 3% mass that we can observe, the massless, which makes up the Orb bar wave process, and many others, is the unseen stuff. So I always tend to try and put an analogy of, imagine a 100-page book, and I give you 3 pages, and I ask you to write an essay on that book. So what we know about science, there's going to be a majority of it that's going to be wrong, to be honest, even though we're using equipment which is matter-based to test for stuff that doesn't have a mass. So it's the massless stuff. I mean, science calls it dark matter, dark energy. Probably life force would be a better, the creative force would be a better idea of it. So what I would say is that the Big Bang Theory will collapse. It's slowly collapsing already. There is a thing called the Hawking's paradox, which is already suggesting that black holes don't exist, or that if they do exist, they counteract each other so that they disappear, and there's no mechanism for them appearing. There is some work by a gentleman called Halton Chippart, and he's been working on redshift since the 80s now. And what he discovered is that Hubble's law of redshift is not correct if what he's been observing from the quasars is correct. So that if redshift is wrong, then the Big Bang is wrong. He had his telescope time taken off him. And for anyone looking to reference Chippart's work, they can go to a program called The Universe, the Cosmological Quest, part 1, and you will see images of what I believe the Sumerians were writing about. So really what we've got is we've got Chippart's work on redshift and how he believes that quasars are formed from the center of spiraling galaxies and not a single Big Bang. So they can form from many spiral galaxies. So that Big Bang theory will disappear, and that will disappear fairly shortly. Another one of the predictions that we had is that there will not be a constant speed to light. If the Orb bar wave carries light, so it's a photon and a wave, and what we've observed the Orb bar wave doing when it hits magnetic fields, then light will not have a constant speed. So basically, this blows apart all of science. Now, one of the predictions was, and I mean, I probably will be overfilling the conversation again, but it relates to a megalithic site called Nantara. And what we were predicting is that particles can move quicker than the speed of light. And only this week in the particle accelerator in CERN have they discovered neutrinos that travel, I think, about 20 times the speed of light. So science is on the edge of collapsing, but it depends on how much the powers that were, I suppose, Cliff's want to hold on to this modern day mythology, which is basically wrong, and it will be proved wrong by the observation. How much telescope time they take off these people who find out these things, how much science they crush because it doesn't fit their theories. Depends on how strong their will is, you know. And there was an interesting one with I don't know whether you heard of it. It's gravitational lensing. Now that is an effect we've recorded on camera, but it's not a gravitational lensing. It's a magnetic reflection. So you see two stars in space, and what they say is the light coming from those stars get warped by a planet with a gravity field, and then you get two stars appearing in your telescope. Unfortunately, they've observed the stars in pairs. They know that there aren't two there because of the signatures. But they can't find the planet or the gravity field. So quite simply, what is happening is that, you know, this is one of the things that I wrote about in the book, is a magnetic, although I probably didn't coin this phrase, is a magnetic reflection or reflection off a field of energy. So if you imagine staring at the moon through a double glazing, I don't know, do you have that in America? Do you have that? If you stare through, sorry, yeah, you're familiar with it. If you stare at the moon, you'll get multiple images, but there's only one moon there. And so what it's hitting is a field of glass, you know, being the light refraction is slowed down by hitting this field of energy. Refraction or occurs so that you get a multiple image. And all that is happening with this double lens effect, or double gravitational lensing is what they call it, is that it's magnetic reflection off energy fields in space. So that is these things, because you've been studying the camera and how the camera works and the orbs and the energy, you get pictures. Another thing that I found fascinating is the constant speed of gravity. There was a Lockheed engineer, and he was experimenting with magnets. He had 4 magnets with holes drilled in them, and he bolted 2 of them together with their attracting forces, so they're just locked in together. He put the bolt through them, bolted them together. He then took the 2 of exactly the same 4 magnets, and he turned them round so that the repelling forces were against each other, and bolted them together. He encased them in concrete so nobody knew which ones were which, and he dropped them from the top of a building. The one with the repelling forces hit the floor after the one who had the attracting forces. Now that defies the laws of gravity. So the law of gravity is wrong. But of course they stop any of this research because there's no explanation to it. And I got an interesting, I'll refer back to that gravity experiment later in the conversation.